What's going on, people? There's a couple of Bible verses that I would like to read to you because I keep hearing so many people talk about what the church's responsibility is, and they don't realize that the church is an entity all to itself. Okay, that's its own community. Okay, so you can have a church set up in a certain neighborhood and not be a part of that community unless they elect to be a part of that community. In other words, do charitable contributions to that community. Okay, but when it comes to a technical community, the church could be within a community, but yet not be a part of that community. And what I mean by that is you have the holy and the unholy. Okay, you have the people that are believers, that have everything in common, their belief system. They believe in the same book. They worship together. They pray together. They cry together. They eat together. But then you have people that's on the outside, that's in the surrounding communities, that may have a totally different belief system and don't accept or believe in that belief system, or don't even support that belief system. Okay, now, but before I start, I want you to pay attention to a video that I made before the solar eclipse took place. Okay, and I'm going to put that video on the bottom, and I want you guys to check it out. But in this video, I predicted the hurricane. Now, I didn't say it was a hurricane, but in the video, I said that I felt in my spirit that disaster is on the horizon, that disaster is coming, okay? And I kept repeating it. And I said that I don't know when it's coming, but I know that it's soon. And I talked about briefly the damage and destruction that it would cause. So that video is on the bottom. I want you guys to check that out. Subscribe. Go to Fearless J1111 on YouTube as well as Twitter. Same thing, Fearless J1111. I'm also on Instagram, and my Instagram name is I am Fearless J1111. I am Fearless J1111. I am Fearless J1111. So follow me on Instagram, follow me on Twitter, follow me on YouTube. And if you choose to donate to this channel, the donate button is on the bottom, or the link is on the bottom, that will lead you straight to PayPal, and you can make a donation to this channel if you choose to. Okay, but there's two scriptures I want to bring to your attention, and I'm hoping my neighbor don't start playing his loud music again. He was just playing it, and I'm like, man, I gotta wait till he's done. But anyway, I want to read the story of Jonah. And I'm going to read it as follows. And I want you to listen to what's being said, because you have people that when disasters happen, like what happened in Texas, and even with Hurricane Katrina, people are quick to say what the church should do and want to tell you what the church's job and responsibility is, and who their allegiance is to. Okay, first of all, their allegiance is to the Most High, right? But when it comes to the church being involved in the community outside of its community, that's something that's totally different, because people talk about the separation of church and state. There's people that tell you don't talk about politics and religion because it don't mix. But when disasters happen, you have people that start speaking political about the church and how the church is tax-free and they should help these people, these victims, not realizing the type of spirit that's among them. And for all we know, it could just be judgment upon these people. It could be God's way of letting these people know that you need to get yourself right. Okay, but I'm going to read the story of Jonah, a small portion of it, and you can go back and read it for yourself. But it reads as follows. At this time, another prophet named Jonah was given the word of the Lord to the Israelites. Now, it was specifically says to the Israelite, not to everybody, to the Israelites. To Jonah, the word spoke, saying, Go to Nineveh, that great city, and preach to it, for its wickedness rises up before me. So because of the wickedness of the people of the Israelites, God is letting Jonah know to go to Nineveh and preach to them, preach the word of the Most High. Okay? He's not telling him to go there and give them free food or give them shelter. He's telling them to go and preach the word of God. It says, but Jonah did not wish to preach to the people of Nineveh, for they were the enemies of his land, the land of Israel. He wished Nineveh to die in its sins. Okay, now that sounds like a lot of us self-righteous people that see the wickedness of the land and see the wickedness of the communities, and with our own selves, our human side steps in and wish that they were destroyed. Just like you hear some of us say that a hurricane should go through there and wipe out those people that's looting and killing each other. Okay? So Jonah had that same mentality. He had that same spirit. Okay? He didn't want to go and preach to these people because he just knew how wicked they were. Okay? He wished Nineveh to die in its sins and not to turn to God and live. So Jonah tried to go away from the city where God had sent him. He went down to Joppa and took a ship for Tarshish. Now Jonah's running from his calling because he didn't want to preach. So he's running now, thinking that he's running from God. And I'm going somewhere with this. But the Lord saw Jonah on the ship. I'm going to repeat that. The Lord saw Jonah on the ship. And the Lord sent a great storm upon the sea, so that the ship seemed as though it would go into pieces. See, sometimes God has to rattle your position. Sometimes we get so comfortable in life and we forget about God and we start cursing God and start doing things contrary to what the Most High commands us to do. And sometimes God has to come through with nature and shake us up. The sailors threw overboard everything on the ship, and when they could do no more, every man prayed to his God to save the ship and themselves. Jonah was now lying fast asleep, and the ship's captain came to him and said, "What do you mean by sleeping in such a time as this? Awake, rise up, and call upon your God. Perhaps he will hear you and save our lives." So I guess their gods wasn't working, but think about it. A storm is happening around Jonah. And sometimes we can get so into the Most High, we trust in the Most High so much, although we're outside of his will, to the point where even in adverse situations, even in turmoil, even when a natural disaster is occurring, we're at peace within ourselves. And Jonah had peace within himself, even in the midst of the storm that was surrounding him. I'm going to read on. But the storm continued to rage around the ship. And they said, "There is some man." Now this is the point I want you to pay attention to. There is some man on this ship who has brought upon us this trouble. Let us cast lots and find who it is. Then they cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. They said to him all at once, "Tell us, who are you? From what country do you come from? What is your business? To what people do you belong? Why have you brought all of this trouble upon us? Think about that. Why have you brought this trouble upon us? It's not good to always bring outsiders into your home. This goes back to people judging Joel Osteen for not opening the doors of his church to the victims of a natural disaster. See, it's not always good. And then you got people that, because of past experiences with Hurricane Katrina, there's people that don't want these hurricane victims in Texas to come into their towns or their neighborhoods or even their homes because of past history, right? So it's not always good to bring people into your home because that person could be under judgment or under condemnation or under some type of curse. And by you opening the door to aid these people that's under a curse, that's under judgment, that judgment now comes upon you and your family. You now take on their judgment until you cast them out. And that's what happened with these men on this ship. They had no idea that Jonah was on that ship sleeping. And they knew that it was more than just a natural disaster, a storm that's brewing in the wind. They knew it was more than just that. These are men that's always on the water. And they knew that there's something different about this storm. This is not just a natural occurrence that's happening here. This is happening for a reason. Something that's supernatural, where we have to call upon our individual gods to see what it is. Check this out. Then Jonah told them the whole story, how he came from the land of Israel. He's an Israelite, a black man. And that he had fled away from the presence of the Lord. He fled away from the presence of the Lord. Again, he fled away from the presence of the Lord. And they said to him, "What shall we do to you, that the storm may cease?" Then Jonah said, "Take me up and throw me into the sea. Then the storm will cease and the waters will be calm. For I know that for my sake, this great tempest is upon you." See? So he knew that he was the one that drew that energy, that negative energy, that judgment and destruction upon those in the ship. See, a lot of times when you have turmoil going on in your house and you're trying to figure out, where's all this coming from? I'm getting hit on every side, on every angle. But then when you start doing a little investigation, you'd be surprised what you might find. You might find something or someone hiding in your midst that don't belong there. See? So God's got a way of finding you. So you have victims that were of Hurricane Katrina that ran, and they were scattered throughout in different places. But because of the fact they were under judgment, certain ones, I'm not saying all, were under judgment, God knows where you are and he will find you. So when you commit crimes, murders, and you run, and those crimes are unsolved, but yet you and your family members know and that's fully aware of what went down, and you know that the law is looking for you, and you run, the Most High's got a way of finding you. So when these natural disasters come through, these hurricanes, and certain people die and get killed, or they're stranded somewhere, that's God trying to tell you something, if you please. But the word says, but the men were not willing to throw Jonah into the sea. They rowed hard to bring the ship to the land. See, now these men were trying to spare Jonah. See, these are good humanitarianism. Is that what they call them? Humanitarian. I can't pronounce that word, but humanitarianism, my voice just won't do it. My tongue doesn't work that way. But you know what I'm saying. They were trying to save Job's life. They weren't trying to throw him overboard, right? They heard what he says, but yo, man, I'm not going to throw you overboard like that. I'm not going to do that to you. We're going to try and try to get to safety. See, but God's got a way of finding you, right? They rowed hard to bring the ship to the land, but they could not. Then they cried unto the Lord and says, we pray thee, O Lord, we pray thee, let us not die for this man's life. For thou, O Lord, hast done as it pleases thee. At last, when they could do nothing else to save themselves. Now, God, he heard them, but he didn't hear them. See, because God knew, like, listen, you're harboring somebody that you should not be harboring. See, I have a mission for that man, and he's running, right? He's a fugitive. He's a fugitive of the Lord. That's a sermon I might preach one day. He's a fugitive of the Lord. So you're harboring a fugitive. And until you give him up, disaster and judgment is upon you. Even if it means just putting fear in your heart. Then the men on the ship feared the Lord greatly. They were wise, because the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And unfortunately, you have so many people, especially in the black community, that don't fear the Lord. They don't fear him. And that's why we see so much death and damnation and destruction among us, because you don't fear the Lord. And white people are getting away because of the judgment that's upon you. Oh, that's deep right there. All right. But the men on the ship feared the Lord greatly. They offered to sacrifice to the Lord and made promises to serve him. Check out what they're doing. They're saying like, look, Lord, we're willing to serve you. We'll do anything for you. We'll make sacrifices to you. We'll even make charitable donations to the church. But God didn't want to hear that. And the Lord caused a great fish to swallow up Jonah. Now, I assume they threw him overboard. Okay? Because it went from, at once the storm ceased and the waves. Okay, hold on. I skipped a part. They prayed. And at last, when they could do nothing else to save themselves, okay, they threw Jonah into the sea. When they saw that nothing else would help them, they threw Jonah over into the sea. At once the storm ceased and the waves became still. Then the men on the ship feared the Lord greatly. They offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made promises to serve him. See, they gave up their gods. See, once they saw that miraculous occurrence that took place, they worship the Most High. But people nowadays don't have that kind of wisdom. God will do something great for you, and you'll turn around, you'll serve him for a little bit, but then you'll go back into your mess again. But anyway, it goes into where the great fish swallowed Jonah, okay? But I'm not going to go any further because I read that for a purpose, because you can't run. So when you got people like the hurricane victim or Hurricane Katrina, and they ran into other people's homes and cities and towns, listen, the Most High's got a way of finding you. So it's not always good bringing strangers into your home. Just like it's not always good for churches to open their doors to people just because a natural disaster occurred. Okay, it's not always good because they could be bringing judgment upon themselves. Again, they could be bringing judgment upon themselves. Now, one other verse I want to read in Matthew's, the 15th chapter, starting the 25th verse. And it reads as follows. The woman came and knelt before Jesus or Yeshua. Lord, help me. Now, this woman is coming to Yeshua for help. Okay, because you got people that like to tell the preacher what his job is and what his function is. The church is supposed to help people. It's supposed to feed the hungry, right? And those people that need that need shelter, you're supposed to open your church and let them in, right? You're supposed to do that. But check out what happened when this woman that came to Yeshua for help. Look at what he said to her. The woman came and knelt before him. She said, Lord. She even acknowledged him as Lord. She said, Lord, help me. She said, but Jesus replied, it is not right, or in other translations say not fit, to take the children's food and toss it to the dogs. He called this woman a dog that came to him for help. Why did he call this woman a dog that came to him and said help? And then she says in return, yes, Lord, she said, even the dogs. She admitted she knew who she was. And she humbled herself. And she said, even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table. And because of that, because of the fact she humbled herself like that, she gave herself that. Her faith is what saved her. Again, her faith is what saved her. And you have so many people that are dying in these storms because they have no faith in the Most High. They've turned their backs on the Most High. Now, your foreparents had faith, and your foreparents before that. But you seem to have lost your faith somewhere along the line. Sometimes people question and ask, especially black folk, why did black Americans end up in the condition we're in today? But when we look at situations like the looting that's taking place and all the black on black violence and crime and murders that's taking place, all the abortions, black women aborting their children, sodomy, homosexuality and lesbianism, all this other nonsense that you've taken onto yourselves, and you wonder why the Most High don't hear you, and you wonder why disaster is upon you. When I look at those news clippings, man, when those news articles, there's black people that's swimming in the waters, that's homeless, that's dying. A black woman died and her baby lived. There's a story behind that. And sometimes we get so caught up in the natural and the physical, and we see these people dying, and it hurts our heart, and we want to just help and save them. But sometimes we have to help and save ourselves. See, the Most High gave us the tools to do that. But we choose. We make the conscious decision and choice to ignore what the Most High have given us to save ourselves. He said, I wish above all that you may prosper and be in good health, even as your soul prosper. So when you start looking at the church saying what the church should do and what the church's responsibility is and how the churches are supposed to open their doors and let the people in for shelter, that's wrong. Because the church is only accountable for the church. It's a totally different community, a totally different entity. So when they're tax exempt because they're a whole totally different entity, their community off to itself. Just like Manhattan, New York. It's a part of New York, but it's an island to itself. New York City has a whole totally different tax bracket than upstate New York. The surrounding areas of New York is totally different than New York City. Totally different tax bracket. So that's how it is when it comes to the church versus the world. Because you hear church people talk about the world. When I was in the world, right? Even the Bible talks about the world. You know, those that love the world and the things of the world, the love of Yah is not in them, right? So it's a totally different entity, and the church does not have allegiance to you. Now, I could understand if you donate, if you make donations and whatnot, and if that pastor, that local church knows you, but you just can't expect that church to open their doors, just like you can't expect people to open their homes to strangers. Because they could be opening their doors to a curse or to a judgment that's upon these people, these criminals that's running. So feedback, tell me what you think, subscribe, go to Twitter, FearlessJ1111, subscribe on YouTube, FearlessJ1111 Talk. Feedback, tell me what you think. Until next time, I'm fearless.